Happy August. This is a full table for August, so I'm sure everybody postponed their summer vacation so they could be here today. So we want to thank you all for that. My name is Rhonda Haas. I'm the chair of the Greater Columbia GCACH, and I'm from Yakima Neighborhood Health Services, and I represent the housing sector. And we will go around and start with introductions. Let me start by just asking if anybody is on the phone. So let's start with the phone call.
Ed Thornbrew, Chief Administrative Officer, Comprehensive Healthcare. I am representing behavioral health.
Thank you, Ed. Is anyone else on the phone? Okay. We'll go to my right then.
Madeline Carlson with People for People Board Secretary and representing transportation.
Ashley Fernandez, Greater Columbia ACH.
Lauren Johnson, Greater Columbia ACH.
Terry Green, Three Rivers Community Foundation, board member representing philanthropy.
My name is Jim Barth, and I'm from Barth Clinic in Yakima, Washington.
Les Stalmacher, Educational Service District 123 Education.
Megan DePaul with Walla County Department of Community Health, representing public health. Jenna Shelton, Greater Columbia ACH.
Martin Sanchez, Greater Columbia ACH.
Carol Moser, Greater Columbia ACH Executive Director.
Candace Flores from Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic, representing SQHC.
Julie Peterson from Kittitas Valley Healthcare and Hospital District 2 in Kittitas County. I represent hospital.
Wes Lucky, Deputy Director, Greater Columbia.
Sam Riddell, Greater Columbia.
Becky Coleman, Greater Columbia.
Ruben Peralta, Greater Columbia.
Diane Halo, Greater Columbia.
Patrick Jones, representing Spokane.
Ruben Alvarado, representing local government with City of Haskell.
Martin Valadez, I work here at Tri-City Community Health. I'm the past president, and I don't represent anybody.
Great. And around the back, would you all introduce yourself?
Hello, Courtney Ward with the Mayor Group.
Jack Davies, Northwest Rural Health Network. Deanna Quinn, Quality Behavioral Health.
Samantha Frederick, Quality Behavioral Health.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so the first thing, well, first of all, I want to welcome Julie Peterson to the board. This is Julie's first meeting. So would you like to maybe just tell the board anything about yourself?
Well, as I said, I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Kittitas Valley Healthcare. Kittitas County has 2 hospital districts, so we are wall-to-wall hospital districts, and I represent both.
Just a second, Julie. So, Ed, could you maybe mute your phone? We're getting a lot of background noise.
I am on mute.
Oh, that's better. Thank you.
We heard somebody else.
It wasn't me. And someone there is rustling papers next to the microphone, so it might be, I would ask that they stop that.
Okay.
If somebody's in a car driving, could you mute your phone, please?
Yeah. So, well, let me ask if there's somebody else on the phone. Would you like to introduce yourself?
So, Rhonda, this is Lori Brown, and I'm not on the phone. I'm on the computer audio, and I just signed in, so maybe it might be me. So let me see if I can how to mute it. I think I know.
All right. Thank you, Lori.
And this is Caitlin with the Mayor Group, and I have been muted, so you can't hear me in my noisy coffee shop.
Okay. Well, thank you for announcing yourself, Caitlin. Appreciate it.
So, again, we're a rural community, a rural county up in Kittitas County, but over the years I have worked at Cadillac Regional Medical Center in finance, and I've also been at PMH Medical Center in Prosser. So I've been all over the Greater Columbia. I look forward to representing hospitals here.
Great. And I think this is, Becky, is this your first board meeting? Good. So we welcome Becky also. Okay. So at the beginning of each meeting, we also ask board members to remind themselves of our conflict of interest policy and our statement of self-dealing transactions. And so looking at our agenda, does anybody see anything on the agenda that would represent a conflict of interest for themselves?
I have a conflict with the mid-adopter funding policy.
Okay, on the voting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so, and then we will welcome any public comments on items that are not on the agenda itself at the end of the agenda. So you should have received the board minutes of the July meeting with the board packet. And so any comments about the board minutes that were sent out?
And a reminder, this is a conference call.
Oh, yeah.
Call-in meeting.
This is a call-in meeting. So I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes for those that have reviewed them.
I move to approve the July 19th meeting minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So I just want to remind people that I'm a non-voting member.
Thank you.
I didn't.
Is that an
Rhonda,
abstention?
I don't vote, but just so that, since I haven't been here in a while, people may.
Okay. Yes, Lori?
I'll abstain because I was at the July meeting.
Okay.
And I abstained because I wasn't here to be able to say whether it's accurate or not.
Okay. Okay. So the minutes are approved. Let's go on to the report and update. So, Carol.
Okay, so this is a GCACH report that is shared with all of the staff, since we have so many staff now that have been doing some wonderful things. We'll all take turns giving the report. First, the big news that you all voted on at your last meeting was the 23 organizations that have been selected for practice transformation. They're listed in your report. Several of them are on this board, several are on the practice transformation work group board, but generally this was through a very thoughtful and thorough process that was devised with the help of OHSU and using our 8 change concept. So these practices then will be entering into contracts very shortly with Greater Columbia ACH, using the primary patient-centered medical home as the kind of the foundational method that we'll be asking our practice our organizations to, I guess, adopt if they aren't already a patient-centered medical home, which many of them already are. They've all been reached out to. They all should have received a letter of congratulations from me. I've heard back from many of the organizations. They're really excited to start this process. And I think initially we'll have the first 11 that we're going to try to get through by the October 1st, Sam. Mm-hmm. And then the next 12 will be following that. So this is I think a kind of a long process to go through in terms of selecting the organizations, but we all recognize that strategically it's our primary care practices that will be implementing many of these project areas. They'll be held accountable through the pay for performance and pay for reporting measures. And so we felt that this mix of organizations had the best chance of us to be successful out of the chute. I think that's about it for the organizations selected for practice transformation. Sam, do you want to talk about the practice transformation assessment?
The assessment?
The next page?
Yes. So the practice, well, primarily we're going out to the BHO organizations. We are, I think we have 3 left, but they have all been scheduled with the exception of 1. So we have been boots on the ground running. As you well know, it's only been a couple of weeks that we've actually been doing that. So we've been very successful in our implementation plan and making sure that we're getting out to these different entities. I know that we wanted quality here pretty quick, right?
Yep.
So with practice transformation, we are reaching out to these different organizations, and many of you have already heard from us, and so we'll be coming out and doing assessments, whether it's the PCMH or whether it's the NEHAP, as well as billing toolkits to make sure that we are looking at your infrastructure and aligning our goals with your organizational goals. Anything you want to add, Jenna or Martine?
I would just add that we've been getting really good feedback. Our team is chewing. So.
Well done, Mark.
Strategic. We've been getting really good feedback from the organizations we've gone out to, just saying that it's made the INC transition a lot easier, that we're very responsive and helpful. So we appreciate that because we want to be essentially staff for them when we go through these transitions. So.
And I second what Jenna said. All the organizations that we've been going to have been, received us with open arms, and we've been able to help them. We've learned from them. They learn from us, and we want to form those lasting relationships with, the people that we're working with.
How about the Yakima Nation update? Ben, you're way down there.
Yes, I have it over here too. So since June 18th, we've had 6 meetings in Tompkins. Half of them have been with Yakima Nation itself to see how we can help with some of the technical difficulties. And 3 of those meetings also have been along with Astria Tompkins to figure out ways for collaboration to address their health needs in the area, in particular collaboration in using the Yakima Nation using the detox center that Tompkins Astria is about to open, or they might have opened by now. So it's been a very productive 2 months as far as the Yakima Nation is concerned. We hear from other areas of the state that we are pretty much, further along than most areas in working with their tribes. Granted, we only have 1. The other ACHs have up to 7. So yeah, we are progressing very well with the Yakima Nation.
Thank you. And we're going to skip the semi-annual report since that's on the board's agenda. We'll come back to that. So Becky, do you want to give the portal update?
Sure. We have been continuing to process payments for the portal. I did my first payment on the portal for the CSAs this last month, which was exciting. We put out a lot of money. Diane's been helping me get the rest of the providers enrolled in the portal to move them ahead, bank and routing numbers that were incorrect. So we've been working with them as close as we can so we can get them their money also. There's a little table in the newsletter that talks about the total amounts that we have allocated. The CSA ones are the only ones I was involved with, but there's a total of $235,000 that we've distributed so far, and there's more to come. Exciting.
Thank you. Diane, you want to do the IMC?
Sure. So we're getting ready for the integrated managed care at the beginning of the year. So we've been working with the providers. There's 3 work groups that we've developed, a provider readiness work group and integrated communications work group. That work group meets monthly, and it works on the information that's going to be sent to the consumers themselves, so that we're making sure that the language is understanding for the patients, so they know that this transition that's happening. We have a pretty strict timeline on when this stuff is going out, so we're trying to get everything ready by the next meeting, and so that they're going to start sending things out to the consumers. The other work group is the early warning systems work group, and that work group is just to try to set up some indicators that we'll be looking for as soon as we switch over to the integrated managed care in January, that we'll be able to see if there's any issues or any problems arising. So that's kind of what that work group is for. And like we said, we have 17 providers that we've been working with. They're almost ready to do their contracts. We're at that stage. So as soon as those contracts are signed, we will be able to make some payments to them and get them going. So it looks like we're all should be on track to be able to. In October, they start testing, and so we're hoping that our providers are gearing up for that.
And just to remind the board that we are the only ACH in the state that is managing this transition. The Behavioral Health Organization did not want the contract from the Healthcare Authority, so we said that we would tackle this work, and it's been really a blessing in disguise because the behavioral health organizations are getting a lot of individualized attention. I think we might be the only group that's having people make house calls, so to speak. And but the reception has been really great. I think we're going to be really ready for implementation come January 1st. And I don't know if any of the MCOs want to talk about how you think that our process is developing.
I think it's a good thing for the system that the ACH is working with the VHO, because it is what I've seen here of the work groups that have been getting the report. It's kind of taken away the politics of working with the VHO. And it's just the professional group of the ACH which understands the community, working with the provider technical team, with the early warning system on the clinical side, with the communications group. So I think it makes for, I mean, we have a few scars across the state in the different levels of anxiety regarding the transition to IMC, depending on who's the leadership of the VHO, if they're present in the board of the ACH or not. So we're finding this very productive. It's working, and all the MCOs are engaged in conversations with the team here.
I think the work groups are going great. I have been trying to let people know about the meet and greet on the 23rd. Have you nailed down a location yet?
As of yesterday, Megan said that she found a place.
Oh, great.
Gonna email me and let me know. And then I wasn't sure, do you guys want me to send out the invite?
If that would be great if you could. And I've so that'll be the opportunity for you to kind of meet some frontline staff from each MCO that you'll be working with in various departments. It's very informal, and we're very excited about it. So, yeah. Otherwise, I think the work groups are going very well. And the ACH has been, Diane, you've been great with handling and facilitating communications between us and the MCOs and providers. So, yeah, I think everything's going great. Thank you.
Caitlin, I know you're on the phone. Did you want to say anything?
No, I don't think so. And plus, it's just loud in here. So if my colleagues in the room where it's not as loud have things to say, I think that might be better.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Lauren, you want to talk about the new bling?
So in July, we were able to find a leased car for us to use. Mainly our practice transformation team has been using it to travel all over the state. It's going to Pullman tomorrow, I think. And we put some signage on it, so hoping to get some recognition and raise some curiosity throughout the community and the state, and hopefully they'll look us up and kind of see what we're all about, and hopefully you guys will see us on the road and wave at us.
So this is truly a decision driven by finances. It's way more efficient to lease cars rather than have us repay all of our employees for a time spent on the road. And it's, you know, time and, not time, but it's the mileage that, you know, wears down a car. And so I think that this was a great model. We had tried 3 different agencies to try to lease a car, but because we didn't have a credit history, I actually realized that within my own Rotary Club, I had a person that owned Bill and Debbie Robertson's Nissan. So I kind of leaned on Bill, and he came through for us with a lease. It was simple as that. So these relationships really do matter. We had tried using people that we didn't really know within the community. Ruben had a lead with somebody, but that didn't really turn out. So working through Bill and Debbie Robertson Nissan, I think, well, you know, it was a great match for us. It is a pay forward lease. We had to pay for the entire 3-year lease, but it also saved us an interest payment too. But they were at least willing to accept that model when the financing companies were not willing to do that for us. So it pays to know people in high places, I guess. And then, Lauren, did you want to talk any about your map? Or?
Sure. So this map I created based off the initial cohort for practice information that we selected, and that was approved in July's meeting. So as you can see, we have selected organizations within each county within Greater Columbia. Yeah, and then color-coded by sector, and you can look within the legend to reference that to see which color goes with which.
And then we will get to the STAR later.
Great. Okay, so let's go on to the financials.
Okay. Okay, so let's start at the top. The very first item on there is $25,000 for a payment that we received from Yakima Valley Community Foundation that has been reserved for the Yakima Nation.
This is the statement of activity.
Yeah, it's the big, actually, she's looking at the big spreadsheet.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
folded up.
that's what she put up for us.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, that's fine.
That's what I was going to switched on me while I was in mid.
Okay, all right, now we're going to switch to
This one?
The balance.
Which one do you want to look at first? The big one. Okay.
Sorry. No. Okay, can we start over? Did everybody get that? We're good? Okay. Let's see, the next thing was $60,000 that we received from FIMC funding for deliverables that were due on July 16th. And that is for the new position that Diane's taken on.
Those were providing, we had to provide our list of participants in our work.
Okay, next line, $13,359 is interest that we earn from our money market account. And also please remember this is for 2 months since we didn't have a July meeting. This is June and July. Sorry, I should have said that from the beginning. The next line is $350 for travel that Carol did going to Seattle, Toppenish and various other places for those 2 months. $16,370 we spent with the Oregon Health and Science University for consulting for June and July. 509.41 food for board meetings, ownership council. I've been learning you guys have a lot of meetings. That's a big expense for those 2 months. The company logo for table cover for amusement meetings at Ruben. Yep, for Ruben's meetings. There's another expense for executive director travel for June and July. $30,000 was a FY 2018 loan payment for the Walla Walla. $670 for postage, $272 for brochures and supplies and some swag bags that were made for. Okay, next page.
So we probably don't need to go line by line.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, I know what this is your first one. So let's just go through any highlights that are kind of out of, if there's anything exceptional.
Okay.
This is what we've typically done.
Okay. So I guess the big exceptional thing we've already talked about is the car lease.
Yeah.
That's kind of down past the middle of the page, 12,316. That was the car lease that we did.
And for, just as a refresher to the board, I know Brian's not here, and I know you reviewed this with Brian in detail.
I
And
did
so
go
that's
through
typically
detail
why
with
we
Brian.
don't usually go through it in lots of detail. So just really any highlights.
I like that much better anyway.
The board has, if anybody on the board has questions, then we want you to have the opportunity to ask them, but we really don't need to go through line by line detail.
That's perfect. I love it. Another really big expense on here is towards the middle, $13,378 for new furniture, electronics, and off. We supplied 2 new offices, one for me, and there's another office that's empty for, I'm not sure yet who's going to go in there. So that was another big expense. The next line is the car insurance, which of course is important. So down at the bottom, there's a $10,000 payment to Quad Aim Partners. That was a project that Wes has been working on.
That's the Digital Health Commons Power Project in Owensboro.
The next page is payroll, health insurance, payroll taxes, 401k for the employees. That's pretty much it.
So does anybody have any questions about the statement of activity?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and this comes with Brian's recommendation to approve the financial statement.
Yes.
So is there a motion to accept the financials?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion?
Is that Julie
Yes.
and Sandra? Thank you very much.
Okay, moved, seconded, any discussion?
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
Can Julie motion if we haven't approved her on the board?
Oh. Oh, you stickler.
I'm just saying.
Probably not.
And I flipped that over that we got to this.
Oh, wait, haven't we approved her?
No, not yet. It
Oh.
needs full board approval.
Approve the recommendation.
Thank you.
Approve the
And I'll keep my second.
You'll second.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
All in favor?
Didn't want to be a pain, but.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Finances are approved. Thank you. Thank you, Seth.
And just clarification, that includes also the balance sheet. Okay, right.
Okay, next item, approval of Julie Peterson.
Can I make the motion on that one?
So as you may recall,
Try not to have you here, Julie.
those of you that attended the last month's meeting, we had some clarification on our bylaws and how we appoint vacant positions, and we referred back to the processes that the sector representatives come together, they make a nomination that goes then to the nominating committee that approves or denies that nomination, and then it comes forward to the full board for approval. So we had a meeting a few weeks ago with Russ Myers, Brian Gibbons, Shane McGuire, Barbara Mead, and Scott Adams, who had forwarded, then they nominated Julie Peterson to fill this position. It was a unanimous decision that was forwarded to the nominating committee. That was a unanimous decision by the nominating committee to accept the nomination as Julie Peterson as the hospital sector representative, and now it's in front of the board.
I move to approve.
Okay, so Sandra and Madeline, is there any discussion? No? Okay, so all in favor of accepting the nomination from the hospital sector?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
That was a late one. So welcome, Julie, to the board.
Thank you. Now you can motion away.
Okay.
Now you can make the next motion.
Motion as much as you want.
Leftover
You have to make up that one now.
So now we're going on to the approval of the revised budget and fund flow charter.
And I should have added in that last segment is that Russ reminded me that Julie was past president of the Washington State Hospital Association, and so he just had great confidence that you would be able to represent the urban and the rural interests, and that you had a broad perspective of hospital needs across the state and across our region.
I'll do my best.
All right, thank you, Julie. The next item of business is that, so the Budget and Funds Flow Committee has kind of changed over time. It used to be that we'd had Ruben Peralta representing the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. Sam Wardell was representing Qualis. I mean, now those two people have been brought in-house. And so the composition of our committee has changed a little bit. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to take a look at the committee charter to see what else we should be looking at. So at the last Budget and Funds Flow Committee meeting, we took a look at the charter. I had some suggested changes because the charter was written during the time that we were writing our project plan application, and a lot has changed, quite honestly, since that time, since last August, really. So I felt that some of these changes were more appropriate now that we've had our feet on the ground. We've had an opportunity to take a look at the funds flow model and determine, you know, what are those areas that really need to be funded. So I put out some suggested changes to the committee, which they approved. They also had some really good suggested changes, especially with regard to the majority of people that need to be present to make decisions, and then regarding the duration of the Medicaid Transformation Project. They felt that the Budget and Funds Flow Committee is complex enough that having people turn over every 2 years was just too disruptive. And so they suggested that these appointments be made for the duration of the Medicaid transformation demonstration. They also suggested that there needs to be a base level of people attending the meetings, at least 6 or 7, and that the simple majority of those people then would be able to be enough to conduct business. And then we went back and asked, I think Becky went back and asked some of the members that we haven't seen in a while if they still want to continue on the committee, and we did receive some responses back that they, just Susie Diaz said that she wants to remain on the committee.
Can you remind us who's on the committee?
So Darlene and Carrie are our 2 co-chairs, and then we have Melissa Hess from Community Action Connections, Loanne Ayers from United Way, Susie Diaz from Yakima Valley. I guess she's with Heritage University now. Ryan Lance, who has attended all the time from Signal Health. Tim Cooper from Prosser Memorial Hospital. He is a very constant attender. Who am I missing?
United Way.
Yeah.
Lori, yeah.
Did you say?
Loanne.
Yeah, Loanne Ayers. Mm-hmm. Did Carrie or Darlene, did you want to add anything more to the report?
I was only on the last half of the call, so.
Okay.
And if you're making the change to serve for 1 year, perhaps that second sentence needs to also be modified. Any midterm vacancies. So that would be hard to. I'm sorry. On the second page.
Yeah, it should be any vacancies instead of midterm.
Yeah.
The term is duration.
We can do that. We will strike midterm. Okay. Thank you, Madeline.
So, I continue to struggle with abbreviations, and there's several that aren't explained. And I know that and just if someone new comes and tries to read it, they're not going to understand. You have GAAP and DISRIF and EDI, and these are all abbreviations for something.
So GAAP is actually fully spelled out under composition.
It's spelled out on the next page, but usually we do it on the first mention of the item, and then it can be, it's just a technicality. It helps when you're reading something. And you have other copies.
That's easy to do.
I have a
Thank you.
question. When we asked about the committee composition, there were 7 names listed, and majority 7. How many positions are actually on the committee? And what percentage does this majority, or at least 7, equal?
There's 10, and so that's why they thought at least 7 people at the meeting to make a decision for the majority.
So 10 or 70%. Okay.
Well, 10 is the full number of people on the committee.
Right. So a majority of at least 7 is 70% to have.
And that was the recommendation of the committee. They felt that they needed to have at least 7 people present to have a meeting.
Right. No, I just wanted to clarify that when you listed who was on the committee, I only counted 7 names. I was like, that's everyone. So making sure there were more spots than 7.
So a quorum is a simple majority, or at least that is.
Does that mean that?
Doesn't.
Simple majority, I would just say at least 7, because it's not a simple majority.
Yeah.
That's your point, right?
Yeah, it's either going to be 6 or 7, and then I wanted to make sure that there were, that wasn't 100%, because when I was like, that's only 7 names.
So what was the committee recommending? Was it at least 7, or was it a simple majority?
I think it was, to approve something, there has to be at least 7 members, and then present, and then to approve something, it's a simple majority.
Right.
So there has to be 7 present to conduct any business, and of those 7, the simple majority can approve something.
Okay. Yeah, that'll make more sense if we take out on this first section, though, for quorum, a simple majority, and have the quorum as 7.
7, and the decision is.
And then we also won't have, the committee also won't have to deal with deadlock votes when it's simple majority. So. Okay, everybody clear?
With those adjustments, please.
I move to approve the
charter with the mentioned adjustment.
Okay, thank you. Second by Ronnie. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? The revised charter is approved.
Great.
Thank you. Duplication of funding policy.
So, we're getting to the point now where we are looking at different use categories of funding. Some of the funding will come from behavioral health incentive funding. Some of the funding comes from our engagement fund. Some of our funds will come from population health management. So it's possible that an organization, if we're not careful, could receive funds from multiple sources without really understanding where their sources of funding are coming from. So I think the most relevant example is we have a bunch of behavioral health organizations that will be receiving a significant amount of funding through the integrated managed care. If we're not careful, I think a behavioral health organization could easily be led to believe that they could use all that funding for population health management tools, but at the same time, if they're also being contracted with a Greater Columbia for practice transformation, they would be receiving a duplicate source of that funding. So this is just a policy that says no organization will receive duplicate funding for the same purpose. So in other words, if you're getting 150 for population health management tools, you can't use that $150,000 that you're getting for behavioral health integration for the same thing. So we'll just have to watch it carefully as we're contracting with these organizations so that we're not duplicating funding. That's all it is. I just wanted to make it clear that that's a policy of the board, that we are not going to allow duplicate funding for the same purposes.
So they'll still receive the funding,
Yeah.
they just can't use it for the same purpose.
Right.
Or to transplant.
Not that that would happen, but I mean, there's a potential.
Some of these are large organizations.
Yeah.
That could happen.
Right.
Actually.
So did this policy, was this developed by the staff, or did this come from, where did this originate?
This came from the staff, understanding the payments that you guys are hopefully going to authorize in just a few minutes, just to ensure that staff is clear that if we pay an organization and we write a contract, that it's clear in the contract that they can't use, I'm going to use population health management funding as the most obvious example, because that's $140,000 for all our practice transformation organizations. And some of those same organizations are also being contracted for IMC. So it came from me.
Carol?
Carol, this is Ed on the phone. So it seems to me that this is another, I guess, key piece of communication to the providers is that this makes it really, it should motivate us to give you a more comprehensive implementation plan that would release the funding, at least on the side of the incentive funding. We should have a more detailed plan so you can clearly see the difference and you can resolve that issue at the beginning rather than having to do continuous audits.
I really appreciate that comment, Ed. I really do, because in the contract it does say that we want to have a detailed outlay of the budget and what the money is going to be used for. So I think that will preclude any misunderstanding. We want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding at the very beginning. But thank you for that comment.
Lori, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I had a question. If you're doing multiple contracts with, wouldn't you define that in the scope of work in the contract as to what those funds are for? That's the question.
I think that's a good question, Lori, but I think that the activities themselves are allowable under potentially both funds. So it's asking the receiving agency to identify essentially the color of money they're going to apply to the various projects within the contract.
Okay, thank you.
This is Caitlin, but just to Lori's question, could the provider identify that and then it be put into a scope of work for contract? It might make it at least more simple to track when you know like what providers have been contracted to do which work based on what they have said that they would do with that money. Does that make sense? And most of the BH providers, and Danica, I think you're there, are used to having like scope of work and contract. That's how they operate now.
So if you had a change to your plan, remember that the intent is to develop a plan so that we're working towards preparation by January 1st, and plans can change. And so if you do that, you are creating the additional work of creating multiple contract amendments rather than just delineating in the beginning that you can't charge one activity to both colors of money.
And so I'm seeing this as a policy that would be used to develop the contract, and within the contract you would have that scope of work that would further define it.
This to me is a policy that's just guiding staff as they develop those processes, not something that even any of the contractors would have to say. I mean, we know about it as board members, but this is just giving staff guidance, and it's a kind of a, this is your directive, and it's coming from them. Like, I feel like this is Carol and team asking us to just make sure we're clear on the directive as they take these next step forwards, because they want to be very transparent about their process going forward, which I think is a relief to all of us. So I would motion to approve if we're ready to accept motion.
So this doesn't feel to me like a policy. It sounds like they're saying, this is our procedure. We want to make sure we're being consistent with what you guys, what the direction you're giving us. If we were doing a policy, it would be shorter and wouldn't have all the, all these numbers and all that. It would just be this kind of first section. And I guess I think I'm very okay with them following this. I just don't see, it doesn't look to me like a policy, as in a board policy.
So it's an internal. So yeah, so if it's an internal procedure of how you guys are going to conduct business, and then within the contract, then you can outline the contract itself about no double dipping kind of a thing.
If you wanted a policy, we could take the first.
So Les, are you just asking for a clear single sentence policy statement in support of the procedure on this document?
Yeah, Ed, I'm just saying this. They're talking about policy on, and this to me looks like an explanation of something, not a policy statement, which could be very short. If we need a policy statement, I don't know if that needs to be a board policy. Does it need to be, Carol?
Well, I mean, we're going to have a lot of different sources of funding that are coming through this organization. We might be in the future getting grants. We might be in the future doing interlocal agreements. We might be in the future getting funding from, I don't know, the public health district. I don't know, but I just want to make it clear that we want to track that as an organization, and we want to be clear with our provider organizations that we can't pay you twice for the same purchase.
Should that policy then be like?
I think what it does, though, it would prohibit you from using one source of funds to leverage the other if the cost of the project exceeded what the funding was providing. So we're saying right now that what you can't conceive a project in excess of the available funding, and further, you can't apply both types of funding to the project. Is that correct?
No, I don't know that I agree with that.
Yeah, that's not how.
No, that is not what it's meant to do. I don't know that I agree with that. I think the policy would mean that if you were going to get funding for a similar topic, say diabetes, that it would have to be for a scaling of what you're already contracted for, not what's already included in your contract. Right.
Sorry, were you trying to say something?
So I was kind of, going from what Les said about the policy, because if you think about this has all to do with financial, and we have a fairly extensive financial policy, and so I wonder if there's a way that this can be integrated
briefly into the finance policy.
Well, Megan had a comment.
Oh, yeah, well, I think that piggybacking off of that, integrate this into the finance policy for ongoing support, but then this could just be a procedure on how to deal with kind of this specific situations, because I'm guessing there will be other situations that arise that will maybe be somewhat similar, but not completely similar.
So I just want to, at the very end of this is a recommendation. I'll read it to you. The recommendation is that staff is recommending that the Budget and Funds Flow Committee develop a policy to exclude payment duplication for population health management and infrastructure funding. So that's the policy statement.
Yeah, there it is.
That Budget and Funds Flow do that, but I was giving you some background to show you, to demonstrate how it could be applied to a particular situation.
Yeah, yes, I agree.
Okay.
Somebody could develop a policy.
But it's not a policy then.
Second?
It's not. It's a recommendation to develop.
Okay, so, so we have a motion for the proposed recommendation. And we have a second from Megan. Now, the question is, Kathleen, do you know what the motion is?
I believe that it would be standard motion to accept this recommendation with this exact sentence, and then that's what I would type in the minutes.
Okay.
And I would, that would be accurate. We had a brief discussion about this, but like, now that I'm keeping my minutes really simple, I don't have to go through all of it.
Do all the board members understand the motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Anyone abstaining? All right, motion is approved. So I have a question now that we just approved that, because I don't want to confuse things. On this chart, and I'm just going to use Farm Workers as an example, does that mean that they can't access both of those columns of funding? That they would not get the IMC dollars and the practice transformation dollars?
No, they could get both, but they couldn't use the same dollars for the same thing.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I just want to make sure I
Like
wasn't
double billing.
confused.
They can't double bill.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, good job.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the mid-adopter funding recommendation. And so Danica, would you like to come to the table? You and Carol are presenting this, I believe.
My chair doesn't want to come with me.
Okay. And Madam Chair, there is another person that would like to speak to this issue, Jim Barth.
Yes, I understand. So we'll let Danica go first, and then we'll let Jim speak.
Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I don't move right up here.
So, we had come back, we had presented in the past a funding formula. And at one of our follow-up meetings from that, we had a provider who had voiced concerns about how the formula was decided. And so we decided to come together again as a provider group and put our heads together, and different ideas from different providers who presented them. And we still struggled to kind of come to an agreement. And so we formed a committee who met, a group, I think it was 6 of us. And that committee came up with a proposal that they agreed upon as the 6 committee members. And then it was sent out to providers on a vote, whether they approved or disapproved. And we were able to get acceptance from all providers. So the funding formula is what Carol, I believe, has attached in here. Everybody got it? It's there it is.
So I know we all have it, but do you want to maybe just kind of walk us through the
Yeah,
assumptions?
so basically the key points are in there. Basically, the idea was to have kind of a minimum and maximum piece, which is something that providers had suggested. So all providers receive a minimum of $65,000. And then we use the actual first DHO funding formula that is based on Medicaid Live per provider on top of that.
And then we tried to really make sure that SUD and mental health were equally given dollars in a sense. And then we still left the contingency amount.
Can you explain bullet point number 4?
So basically, when we had first, I'll try my best. Basically, when we first had set out looking at another proposal that was discussed in the provider meeting, there was a minimum of $100,000 and a maximum of, I can't remember the amount. But when you have maybe a possible agency who sees 35 people, 35 Medicaid lives are represented from that agency, the concern was that we're giving too large of an amount to individuals who may not be serving very many Medicaid lives. Does that make sense? So cost for provider size and transition assumes fewer economies of scale for smaller providers. So it didn't seem, I guess I would say, fair when one provider is serving 5,000 Medicaid lives and another provider is serving 50 Medicaid lives, that each of them are going to get $100,000 for sure, guaranteed. Does that make sense?
You just dropped the bottom line.
Yes, dropped it down a little bit. Also using the BHO past funding formula a little bit to make sure we're accounting for people who are serving more Medicaid lives and bringing everybody kind of whole.
And so then they're going from the first funding formula to the second funding formula. What drove those discussions? What was the discussion that went from point A to point B?
So in relation to why we went back to revisit it and why we got here, well, actually the first point that was brought up is there was individuals who are in residential services who didn't feel like this was capturing residential providers. And so when taking that back, they decided that's not something that they were concerned about. They were more concerned about that SUD and mental health were treated equally. So, and I even followed up with the person who had discussed their concerns of residential not getting specific amounts, because if you start looking at residential and inpatient, there's many of them. And so pretty soon people would be down to not enough dollars to, you know, help with transition. If you start breaking the dollars down to every single inpatient facility, ENT beds, crisis beds. And we really focused on the language that was set out by the Healthcare Authority about going to those currently contracted behavioral health providers, which has always been seen as usually those outpatient providers. Plus the funding has always been on a base amount of Medicaid lives. Plus behavioral health providers have higher risk in if somebody goes to inpatient or residential. If there's not enough to pay for those inpatient or residential stays, that falls back onto the behavioral health providers to cover the cost of those. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Is there other information you think it's important for us to know here?
Yes, and oh no, there's that one. So just a quick note, we did have literally like the day or the day after, we have one individual on there that had we were notified that their contract was terminated with the BHO. So I just want to make note about that it was decided to push those dollars for that actual facility back into contingency money, because that contingency dollars are really dollars that are going to help with consultation or dollars that the providers will agree on how to spend. So we have just pushed those back into the contingency pot, kind of just sitting there. So they didn't get redispersed to any one person or anything. And let's say that person does end up appealing a decision or anything like that. We have it sitting there waiting for them if that's the case. Does that make sense?
Why did we have to use contingency funding?
We chose to do contingency fund, to leave some contingency funds in case there was something providers needed altogether, like a consult or wanted to hire on somebody to help all providers. Or if there's a situation where somebody is facing an extra financial burden that they didn't expect, that they can come to that provider group and say, here's something we may need support on.
But why was contingency funding used in this formula?
That was to even out mental health and SUD people to have the same amount. So we took some of that to make sure SUD dollars, you don't get as many in our first formula. And that was one of the things that SUD wanted to be paid the same as mental health, even though the rates aren't the same. And so we used some of that contingency money to kind of equal those out.
Okay, any other pieces that you want to make sure the board understands?
I think that was it.
Okay. Carol?
Danica, this is Ed on the phone. May I ask a question?
Yeah. I'm saying yeah. I shouldn't be.
So my question was, you know, the funding source here is geared towards preparing for the transition to fully integrated care. And for the agency that lost the current Medicaid contract, are they under contract with MCOs to become a provider on January 1?
It says that in the document here.
And we're gonna hear from Jim in a minute.
Okay, I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Where is that located?
On the top of the back of the second page.
Well, there should already be contracts in place. The MCOs had to contract with people in order to make applications. So are they currently under contract or not was my question. That's different than what this says.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Okay, Carol, do you have information that we should know?
I think it's mostly covered in this document. So after receiving the proposals, and I think it was the next day or the day after that, there was another proposal that obviously eliminated BARS, a clinic, from any funding. So we started reaching out to figure out what is the protocol here. In essence, it's the ACH Board of Directors that determines the funding for this allocation. We went through this in June to determine whose funds are they, and they actually flow through the ACH through the special terms and conditions of our contract. So it is by the decision of this board to allow the behavioral health providers to self-determine their funding formula. In other areas, the ACHs are determining that funding formula, but in our case, we had been approached by the behavioral health providers to say, could we self-determine that? We said yes. So we wanted a little bit more guidance from the healthcare authority to say, what do we do in an instance like this? I mean, this is kind of an unusual. And so what I try to do in the report is that you'll see who we reached out to. So we reached out to Isabel Jones from the healthcare authority. Her comment is in quotes at the bottom of the page where it says guidance from healthcare authority. So Isabel said, we have suggested the funds should be prioritized for the behavioral health providers that will be serving Medicaid clients and who have historically been contracted via the DHO. You could reach out to BARS and find out if they will be contracting with the MCOs and continue serving Medicaid clients in 2013. 2018, sorry, I should put on my glasses. 2019. Oh my God. Okay, I'm getting so old.
We're with you, Carol. We're
Never get off my glasses. So that was Isabel Jones' comment. And then I contacted Jim Barth, who is here today, that says that he is already contracting with 3 of the 4 Medicaid providers and is getting close to his business processes set up for IMC. And then I contacted Karen Richardson at Rhonda's request, and Karen sent us an email that is highlighted below that says, I will have to speak with, because we were asking for some other documentation from the BHASO, and she said she would have to speak with their attorney to see what documentation they would be able to provide. I can tell you that their contract was terminated due to failure to comply with contractual requirements in regards to data submission. I believe that since funding is currently contracted for BHO providers, having the knowledge that BARTH is no longer a BHO contract provider would be sufficient information at this time. Please note that the funds that originally allocated to BARTH are now in the contingency funds. I'd be more than happy to discuss any concerns via phone call. So then I reached out to Ron Anderson because Ron represents Yakima County on the BHO, and he confirmed that he had voted with the other BHO providers to terminate the contract, and that he said he would do a little bit more research to confirm BARTH's reason for termination. So I tried to provide the board of directors with some information, and then asked Jim if he would be willing to come and talk to you about it, since his story is a little bit different than what we're hearing from the BHO.
Okay, so we're going to have Jim speak in just a minute. So let me just ask if there's any questions up to this point on information that you've heard from the board members. Okay, if not, Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Do you mind if I stand?
Please.
I am, my name is Jim Barth, and I own and manage Barth Clinic in Yakima, Washington. This is a family-owned and operated business that's been in existence since 1991, and you know, I'm really, really nervous. Okay, and I have a lot of anxiety going on about all of it.
We're not.
And I appreciate that. I really do, because
let me just a second. Let me just ask if the folks on the phone can hear. He has a somewhat soft voice. So can you guys hear okay?
Yes, we can hear. I can hear.
Yes.
So our family has been providing treatment services in the Yakima Valley since 1972. My dad was an early staff member of Sundown and Branch, beginning in 1972, and then operated and managed large outpatient facilities in the state of Washington, with his last facility being what was at that time called the Community Alcohol Center, which is now called Triumph Treatment Services. He started an inpatient facility in Sunnyside, Washington, called Green Valley Lodge, and resulted in having a move back to Yakima from Sunnyside, Washington, and he and my stepmother opened up a Barth Clinic in 1/1 of '91, and had a little 2-room operation, and they just took on outpatient services. They were able to continue that business as a result of a local program that has statewide services. Lakeside Milam Recovery Centers had an outpatient office in Yakima, and in 1993 they closed their offices, and my dad assumed their patients, their clients. I joined Barth Clinic in 2000. Prior to 2000, I worked at Sundown Ranch from August of 1986 until 2000, and I went to and joined my dad and began to work in outpatient treatment. And our family has provided outpatient services in the valley for a long time. We have seen a lot of different individuals and families, and been very fortunate in that. What happened with the passage of the ACA, my dad retiring and passed in 2014, and a number of other things, with Medicaid expansion and the ability to access services, our clinic began to be fiscally impacted significantly. And we closed an office in Zillow, Washington. We closed an office in Ellensburg, Washington, and I went from having 17 staff down to 11 staff, and was knocking on the door of potentially losing even more. Because historically I was able to provide treatment services to those individuals that were working poor or who are otherwise uninsured and were able to access services through out-of-pocket payment. The public system changed all that, and those that I were able to treat before that time began to be able to access services. Basically, they went and got treatment for free, and I don't know how else to say it other than that. And I went to the, my daughter and I went to the commissioners, the Yakima County commissioners, and I said to them, here, I'm going broke, I can't compete with free, and we see a lot of people and we do good work and we want to continue, but I don't know how long I can survive this. And they directed me to Susan Reamer. Susan Reamer directed me to the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Organization. We submitted application to them, and in July of 2017. And in the process of that, I hired a consultant, Dr. Richard Cole, who assisted me in some physical planning and how to hire some additional staff and how to develop the plans and programs that were consistent with the charter associated with the GCBHO. And I did that, and I was given information that I would participate in a fee-for-service agreement, a fee-for-service contract. And right from the start, I got paid on a capitated basis, and so those that I saw that I had an expectation that I would be providing a billable service for. It was based on volume, not on individual services. And so consequently, from the start, there was it was not a very comfortable relationship. Okay, I'll just say that, because I didn't agree with them, and I still don't, and I think that it was wrong, because I developed a plan based upon that formula, and as a result of that, I hired staff and developed programs, and brought on monolanguage staff, and implemented Spanish-speaking programs, and did the outreach that they asked me to do, and reached out into the community in places that I wouldn't normally go to, and saw folks on a walk-in basis. And in the course of this, there's also some issues around reporting, technical assistance, and record keeping, of which we failed to do appropriately, and it did not happen in a timely fashion. And for whatever reason, I can't stand before you and make excuses about that, other than that issue was resolved and has been resolved, and it was an unfortunate set of circumstances that put me in a position that they gave me a timeline to make sure that the information was implemented, that it was processed appropriately, accordingly, and it didn't happen. And they said, well, we're going to terminate your contract. And here's a notice about we need you to find other providers and send the people that the 60 people that you currently have in treatment to other treatment centers. And the one thing that I can tell you about our clinic is that people come to us because they don't want to go to larger facilities where they're maybe not treated as individually as they may be in our facility. In our program, we've done that and continue to do that in a very meaningful way, and have been for a long time, and I expect to continue to do that. The record keeping that was necessary to be completed, again, that information has been resolved. and we've submitted the necessary data, and our I didn't even know about you folks. Okay, honest to God, I had no idea that this whole process was happening. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is that I really believe that my conversation with the folks at the GCBHO that was revolved around that I felt that I was being I wasn't being paid right. Okay, just I don't know how else to say it. I think that has influenced this expedited process to remove us from participation in the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health. And I just believe that it was a premature decision, and that I haven't been afforded the opportunity to present our case in a meaningful way that demonstrates that we do good work, we see people on demand, and we work with individuals that are Medicaid eligible, and we'll continue to do that. And they've asked me at this point in time that I'm going to send the folks that I currently see in our treatment program to other places, and I don't want to do that. Okay, you know, I'm out about. I spend a lot of money out of my pocket to make sure this thing continues to happen. Okay, and I've been honest about it, and right up front from the start. Last summer, when I went to the commissioners, I said, "You understand? I can't compete with free. It's you know, and I'm not some big get rich outfit. Okay, you know, we take care of our staff, we take care of folks, and we do good work. Our offices are open, you know, Monday through Saturday. I underwrite services for veterans, either at no cost or half of the published rate that we provide for. The Yakima Nation, you know, I go there and I see folks in White Swan and Medicine Valley and Wapato, and I go there and I provide offsite services. We have a long-standing relationship with the Wheeler family that allows us to go into their facilities and see their employees and work with them and assist them in getting the services that are necessary. You know, we have meaningful relationships with all the providers in our community, and we send people to Sundown and Ranch. We work with Comprehensive with the Integrated Crisis Center. We've worked with Astria around the development of their detox. I send folks to programs all across the state, and I'll continue to do that. But I'm at a place in my life today where I just I'm before you saying that I need help, and I don't know what else to say. I just feel so upset about the whole circumstance, and I don't know if I've made myself clear in terms of how this has unfolded and what our relationship has been. But I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I have nothing to hide in terms of what I'm trying to tell you today. And I just thank you for the opportunity to be here, because you know, our family's been doing this a long time, and I like it. I like alcoholics, okay? And I like working with people because you know, I've been blessed, okay? And so that's kind of where I'm at, and I think that's where our family's at, and we've been there for a long, long time, and I expect it to be there for a long time hereafter. So,
Jim, do you currently have contracts with managed care organizations?
Yes, we do.
Can you tell us about those?
So three of the groups we've signed agreements with, and the fourth one, Molina, the only thing we had to do was we had to put where you press the button for the door, the ADA door. And so they are going to come and take a picture of that, and then they will give us a contract.
But have you had contracts
with Regents, Kaiser, United Behavioral Health, Primera, EBMS, First Choice. I've been contracted with them. I went to my dad got in an argument with the people at Group Health. This is before Kaiser, a long, long time ago, and they said, "Well, we don't want nothing to do with you." And we went to them about 10 years ago, and we're able to describe to them that we provide a unique set of services that are unique to your members, and they contracted with us because we treated individuals that were on Suboxone. We treated individuals individually and on the weekend, in the evenings, different things that were a little unique to our valley that were necessary.
Are those contracts in good standing? I guess?
Yes, they are. And I can certainly provide any of those agreements or copies of those agreements if you like. I can provide copies of my 1 million, 3 million aggregate in terms of professional liability insurance.
Can I piggyback on that? So, Jim, are you contracted with Community Health Plan of Washington or Coordinated Care or AmeriGroup?
So of the four, we're contracted with the three of them, and again, we're in the process. All we have to do is show that we have the ADA door, and we'll have Molina.
What questions do board members have? Oh.
I just have a comment. So when this whole thing went down, like we heard that they had been taken off of the VHO. When I contacted Isabel at the Healthcare Authority, she basically said, well, going forward as of January 1st, are you able to meet our contractual obligations? Are you able to do the things that we require you to do, the MIHAP, the billing toolkit, and be contracted with the MCOs? If those were the case, and that was the case, then as of January 1st, because the VHO could not stop you from being part of this integrated managed care incentive.
There's a couple of these pieces, and I've been in the middle of completing this survey that I got from another provider that I never got. Okay, and it lists all the things that are necessary to be able to successfully compete in that environment, and we can meet that. Okay. I use Office Ally in terms of claim submission. We're the second provider in the state of Washington that implemented keynotes from Avail Health, and there was technical issues around keynotes and the exchange of information. And I'm not going to come to you and make excuses about what I did or didn't do. We didn't resolve that, but we have since resolved that. Okay.
Rhonda?
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I feel like we kind of have two things here. One is with the behavioral health organization contracts, like where are we taking it from people or organizations who were contracted when we started the process or now? I think that's kind of one thing, because they've already started this allocation, and you've made an adjustment to it if needed, but it's kind of, are we taking, from what date for current DHO contracts we want to do? Because if we took Isabel's notion there are a lot of other behavioral health providers in Walla Walla alone who can do this work well, and so I think that we need to just decide on a date of who would, current or BHO contracts at a certain date. Was it July 1, 2018? Was it January 1? Or was it the day that we decided to go mid-adopter? Like, what date? Because I think that is concretely what we can move forward with. Otherwise, might get into a mess with other providers saying, well, you let them move forward and they don't have a current BHO contract and we don't either, but we want in, and that type of thing. And also, I'll say, I sat on the BHO board, and it's hard for small providers to meet all of those. It's hard, and the technical assistance isn't always there.
Okay, so Martine, did you have a comment? No. Other questions, comments?
And Jorge?
I guess I just want to attach on to Megan's comment, because this analysis, and I'm not sure if this came from the staff, but if the monies were earned in October 2017 and they were under contract, is that our date, or is it the date that we did decide to go integrated managed care? But either way, I think that needs to be a decision.
Right.
So I just wanted to piggyback on Mega's comment.
I think we talked about this in the June meeting, though.
Mhm.
For DHOs, if it's earned, if it's been earned.
Right.
We owe them. We earn
Right.
it as a GCACH's
Right.
money. It's not the provider's money, it's
No.
GCACH's money.
Right, we've gone through this.
But I think that because when the providers said that they would become a mid-adopter, I think that's the date that we should go by.
I think when the BHO said,
Yeah.
well, because when that meeting was,
Who wants to be a
that date
mid-adopter?
of that
Yeah.
meeting, I think that's the date, whoever's currently contracted at that time. Because that BHO has been under turmoil. Sorry, I don't want to, anyway. I think it should be from that date
October 2017.
that it was voted that it would become a.
That makes sense. Let's stay on that point for a minute, because that could be a key point here. So, do people feel comfortable with that? That was the October 17 date? I'm seeing nods. How about people on the phone?
I don't. I'll tell you that. And it goes to that issue of, we as providers understood that providers had earned it. That's since been clarified. The ACH earned it, and now providers are having to earn it as of when we get this distribution now and the plan that we put in place now. So I think that the date you're talking about is when the approval of the distribution goes forward. That's when there's access to the funding. That's when we have to develop the investment plans. So I think going back a year for this convenience is probably misguided.
Okay, so we have one dissenting at this point. So is this something that we want to vote on, or is this more discussion?
Can I vote?
Well, we haven't even decided if there's I think you just said that there needs to be a motion.
I think the question I have is there a staff recommendation from the director? Because my impression at this point is you've sought 3 sources that have said probably not. And so what's the recommendation from our director?
Is your recommendation stand, Carol? Does anything change about your recommendation based on the discussion? Okay, so yes, we do. So let's start with Carol's recommendation and see where we go from there. And then we'll open it up for more discussion.
Well, so my analysis you've read is that the funds were made available because of the action taken by the Behavioral Health Organization, and that's what allowed the ACH to get their funding. But that I figured that maybe the board would need some more time to digest the situation, so that I didn't want to hang up the rest of the contract. So my recommendation that we approve the funding formula that doesn't include Barth Clinic at this time, so that the contracts can be initiated with the other providers, because we know that funding will be put into the contingency fund and it doesn't change the funding formula. And then once GCACH has heard from all sides of the dispute, they can always vote to reinstate Barth incentive funding. And then my second recommendation is that you approve the revised BHO contract. Because I think it's a lot to digest for the board of directors today. And I don't know that we have had enough information coming from the BHO, because basically what they told us was that they would have to go through their attorney to give us any more information than what Karen Richardson already gave us.
So I think the question would be, what additional information does the board feel that they would want?
How useful will it be coming from the BHASO at this point? It'll be one-sided.
Very much.
Sorry.
So given that, we could either go with a recommendation or someone could make a motion.
Let me ask a question. So does the money go to the BHOs and then they give them to these groups? No. We're giving it to these groups.
It's our money, Carrie. It's the ACHs has earned, Greater Columbia ACH has earned money. So what we will do.
My question is, why does BHO have a say in who we give the money to?
Because the managed care organizations because we made the decision that the providers who would enter into FMIC and receive the incentive funding, we would only work with providers who had a current BHO contract.
But their board of directors really doesn't have the authority to decide how the funds are distributed, but we were using their funding formula as the basis.
And just to
The
clarify.
healthcare authority asked that they consult with the current provider network.
And so the healthcare authority came to us as providers and our BHO and said, if you would mid-adopt early, you will have these incentive funds to help you make the move. So that is what our commissioners and our BHO board went with to support us as providers. So it's hard to be sitting here thinking that this is what we were getting and it's just kind of turned into kind of like, oh my goodness, this is why we did this, so that we could have financial support.
We still will have financial support.
Right.
If this is passed and goes through, it's just hard. I think we're playing a little bit on words of whose money and who it's just how it's presented to the providers, I think, is a little bit difficult to swallow. Like, okay, so this is what we were told. Now, in relation to who wasn't included in here, we're just giving you the information that was, given to us. So,
Ronnie, did you have a question?
Yeah, kind of just a comment, because what I'm reading here is that in October of 2017, they were under that contract. Whatever took place after that took place, and I think that he said in just collectively that he has tried to work out the problem, and there's been a lot of barriers for him, and I think that the struggle that he's having is more political, I guess, in terms of who's doing what with who, and now you've had to jump through all these hoops. And as a small business in the mental health field, it is difficult to jump through all those hoops because you don't have the same opportunity as money will bring back. So in my eye view, I think that we hold those in lieu of having the outcome that he's looking for after he jumps through the hoops so that he can get back on track. And I think that that's, to me, because he already was there at the time that we asked for his admitted actors to come in. And I just think that it would be conducive to continue to support our communities and take away from our communities. And I think that knowing some of the people that he's helped personally, I think that he really tries hard to make sure that it's very individualized, because I see people coming back and I hear the difference between there and somewhere else. And it's not a money machine. It's somebody who really feels what they're doing is helping. And everybody's going to be, they'll make their mistakes as they go along, but I think that he's doing everything that he can to try and rectify that. So at this time, I think that I would move that we hold those funds while he works out his thing, and then later on.
So you're taking Carol's recommendation that we approve the current plan, holding those funds until that purpose.
Absolutely.
So that's a motion?
That's a motion. I move that we take on Carol's recommendation. Is that? Yeah.
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Can I just ask, what specifically are we waiting for? Are there deliverables that we have, and then will it come back to the board, or will we assume that if those deliverables are met, then the funding will be distributed?
I think that that's what we should do.
But what is the deliverables that will come through? I mean, because otherwise, let's just pick a date for BHO contract, whoever had a current BHO contract, either the day that we vote or back in to October of 2017 when the AC or when the BHO voted. Because otherwise, it'll come back to us and And I don't know that information, even at that time, would meet some of our steps.
So this document says that incentive dollars are intended to be used to assist providers and the region with the process of transitioning to integrated managed care. So the deliverables we're looking for should address specifically that, transitioning to integrated. Are there milestones that we can ask to be met?
And those deliverables are in our contract for each provider. So it's like the need has, I mean, it's specific in their contract of what they need for us. I think they're talking about the deliverables as in, what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for BHO to say, yes, they're going to be back in there?
Right.
Or is it?
In order to qualify, not to, right.
Because we can't expect any provider to meet the FMIC deliverables without money. Until that's
part of our contract, separate than what we're talking about.
Yeah, and part of my dilemma, honestly, was I had to write this report without having all of the information. So I had to kind of caveat my recommendation because we sent this out on Monday. So I wasn't sure if I was going to have any more information. But as it looks like, I think that being able to get a hold of Jim when I did helped fill in some of the pieces of that. And understanding that probably we will not get any more information out of the BHO unless we can get the attorney to come through with a copy of their contract would be, I guess, the only other piece of information. And it doesn't sound like that, I mean, that might take some time to get that, and I don't know if they would release that.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt that. I don't think
So
that was
if
really.
contract for public funds, shouldn't the termination letter be a public?
Hold on. Go ahead,
Is that
Megan.
we need to decide on the date. Is it the date that the BHO voted to become a mid-adopter, the contracts that were current at that time, or is it the date that we vote to distribute funds? The contracts that are current at that time. Those are the two, I feel like the only two black and white options.
So we have a motion on the table, and I think the discussion item that I heard that Julie brought up is, and the motion was to support the recommendation that we have on the board. And the discussion item that Julie brought up was, in order to reinstate BART's incentive funding, what are the deliverables that we would make that decision on? So that's really the question. And so what are those deliverables that we would make that decision about?
And Carol, do you think I mean, you just said that you don't know that we would get them from the BHO and the attorney there, right? And so would we even be able to get, or like, one, I guess, what information would we need to have, but then two, could we get it?
Well, I don't think we need the BHO's deliverables. We need his deliverables. And so if he thought he was part of the contract in October 2017, he's been implementing some things, right? And so I think you listed some of those things. So if those are in line with what the other BHOs are doing or other behavioral health providers are doing, then wouldn't that meet those standards?
The deliverables are up to this board. So the question is, what is it that you would like to have as a deliverable?
Well, he's
I guess I was going to ask that question, is that what is it that I need to do to demonstrate that I meet the eligibility requirements for participation in this process? Because, as I said, and I take full responsibility for what I didn't do, but I can assure you that what's going forward is done, and it has been done, and anything else that's necessary, or if there is an additional requirement, I'll be more than happy to meet or exceed that. I mean, I'm not, I just want to do your stuff. That's it. Okay?
So, I'm sorry, just a second. I interrupted Ed. I stopped Ed. So, Ed, did you have something else you wanted to say here?
Sure. I just have two comments. One, I think the termination letter is a public record, so I'm not sure what the challenge is. The second one is, and Mr. Barth, with due respect to what you've offered to the communities and the services you've provided, and provide under your other commercial contracts. The concern I have is from the narrative you offered, a failure to conceive the current environment of care, the current environment of business, and a failure to comply with contract terms over a period of almost a year. So what I think the board has to consider is the investment of the incentive funding enough to mature the understanding of the business environment, and I think that's a hard thing for us to forecast. But I think if we're getting into kind of the nitpicking of dates of contracts and stuff like that, we're avoiding the elephant in the room, which is a contract termination for a failure to perform, a lack of understanding of the business environment for the Medicaid model, and where we're going. And I think it just had to be said.
Thank you, Ed. Jorge, go ahead.
Just speaking as the alternate to the board, Caitlin not here, and I think just from the perspective of the MCOs, what we can say is that BART will, by the end of this process, will end up having contract with all 4 MCOs that will be operating, and that we will be working with him so he make it to next year. I've been on this conversation on IMC transition for 3.5 years now. And the first conversation I had in Vancouver 3 years ago, before it was even started, one of the CBOs in town told me, my biggest concern with these transitions is that a small provider will be impacted by the complexities of these implementations, by the things they don't know, by the dollars they don't know, to implement specific data management. And yes, we need to be equal and fair to everybody, but the main concern that I have seen in all communities in conversations like this is how can we give a hand to small providers so they stay in business, because we don't even know if they will make it beyond. So I think for the 4 MCOs going forward here in the region, we believe that he has contract with 3 of them. In fact, the only one not yet contracted is with us, but we believe it's just in the technical process. So I think the board needs to think about this as what does it take to keep the small provider organization that's been in business in the region for over 20 years from here to January 1st, when there will be supposedly, and we believe in this, better technical assistance and a lot more of other organizations supporting his work.
Thank you. Okay, so we still have a motion and a second, and we're still in discussion. And the question still is, are there deliverables that this board would like to see in order to reinstate BART's incentive funding? Or would somebody like to amend the motion?
I think Diane has a couple of deliverables. The deliverables, I think, that are, when I talked with Isabel about if they could make our contractor own deliverables, are the ones that are in the contract itself.
Could you say those?
Sure. So the first one is, doing the assessments with us, the MEHAP, the billing toolkit, and then developing their transition plans, and then them also providing us how they're going to spend the money, the incentive funding. Those are the deliverables that we require. And because the way that Isabel had informed me was that because of that date in October, and when they said they were going to be a mid-adopters, as long as they are contracted with the MPOs going forward as of January 1st, then she didn't see why they couldn't be part of it.
So then could I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't be just one clinic who currently is not under contract having to meet these deliverables. It would be everyone having to meet these deliverables before they could get their funding, correct?
Yes, everybody has to meet deliverables.
Does it then make sense that we're excluding someone when they're having to meet the same contract qualifications as everyone else? And when their contract goes into effect, it's contingent upon any of these organizations meeting these deliverables. And so to me, it doesn't seem clear that that's an important distinction we need to make with regards to the motion that's on the table.
So with the funding allocation, the contract will go out, and then they have what period of time to achieve be?
January 1st.
Okay, January 1st.
And if they want their funding sooner, then they'll do it sooner. Most providers are almost ready. We have 14 of them completed their VHAS, their billing toolkits, their transition plans,
Their CSA.
their CSA, everything's done. Most of them have them done. The only thing that we're waiting for is their plan of how they're going to spend their money.
Right, which is what
And we
my,
have the majority
my
of those
point of
as well.
clarification. In none of the, nowhere in the analysis did we say we wanted to exclude them. We said we were holding contingency funds based on, now we're saying based on some deliverables, with the same deliverables everyone has, so it doesn't make sense anymore.
So do we want to call for a vote on the current motion or someone, I guess?
We could either, we could call for the vote, you could withdraw the motion.
I think you just don't know what, because it says heard from all sides of the dispute. Like what more information? I think if that's still the carrot, what more information?
I don't know, is Ronnie open to amending, or does she want to amend her motion? That would change whether or not we need to call for a vote, right?
I'm trying to think, you guys. My head's still wrapping around half of what they said, part of what you said.
Right.
And I'm just trying to make in my mind a clear understanding. I still think that in terms of the recommendation from Carol Mosier, I think it's a good recommendation. I think that when we're talking about deliverables and it's all equal in terms of what others have to do and what he would have to provide is very valid. I think that he was, at that time that we started this process, he was on board. Whatever happened with him in the BHO, I don't know, I don't have clarity on that, but I know that he is, as a provider, I know the work that he's done as an outreach person on the street with clients that have been there. And I've seen for firsthand what they've accomplished through that realm. And I think that it's taking him out of that place and his business not being included is going to be a deficit for the consumer. So I think that withdrawing and somebody gives me an opportunity and we talk about what that could look like as far as another motion.
Well, I have another motion to make if you withdraw.
Okay, I'll withdraw, but I better be able to say yes.
So I'd like to move that the GCACH board move forward with incentive funding to behavioral health organizations who were contracted with Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Organization at the time that they passed their mid-adopter resolution in October of 2017. Second.
Okay. Okay, is
So the
everyone
effect is this.
clear?
First-
Yes, the
first
first
section.
thing.
Clear on the motion? And obviously, I think we're at a point where those that are potential recipients of this would abstain from this as a conflict of interest. We have a second. Who seconded this?
Ms. Carey?
Carrie. Okay. All in favor? Oh, wait, any further discussion? Sorry. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And abstention?
Aye.
Aye.
MCOs need to sustain because we don't have our.
Aye.
Ed, Sandra, Ed, and
Darlene.
abstain. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Danica, thank you. Jim, thank you.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you, Jorge.
So now it's the contract.
Okay, so are we going to talk about the contract? Well, let's talk about the contract.
Carol, is there a contract that you and Mike continue to make changes on for these dollars that were just approved?
Great discussion, everyone, by the way.
So I will cover that.
Okay.
Good little volleyball.
Because I see
Little
some
volleyball.
things in here that are new.
So at the last provider readiness meeting, with all of the providers that were present, they voted to approve this contract, and Mike Burney was on the phone call, and he approved it as well. So the changes to the contract that you saw in June include the following, and they were on the front page of your SBAR, and these are a result of some of the information that Becky Cohn has brought to our organization with her experience in contracts, is that she suggested that we have a proof of insurance.
What's an SBAR?
Situation, background, analysis, and recommendations report.
Oh, okay.
So that's why you have a situation, background, analysis, and recommendation.
Oh, that's the document we were just using.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's just an outline.
This is an outline I stole from Elia.
I like it. That's good. I'll know what that means.
Danica, I'd like to go through this first, okay? So this is proof of insurance with a minimum limit of $1 million. She added some clauses about assurances and conformance provisions that contractors are familiar with and will comply with federal, state, and local laws and regulations. There's a statement in here that says that these funds are public funds, they are not federal funds, and can be used as the non-federal match against GCACH allowable uses. And that the completion of the MEHAP and the completion of the Qualis Behavioral Health Agency self-assessment tool will earn the contractors $10,000 for each deliverable. And this was a clause we put in there because a lot of the behavioral health agencies have been meeting quite often with staff without having any kind of compensation for all the time that they've been putting into their transition plan. So we added those 4 clauses that went in front of the provider readiness work group with Mike Burney present at that, and they voted to approve these changes to the contract. So those are the 4 changes that were in the contract. Did I miss anything, Becky? No.
Is this what I can ask? Okay. So my question is, when we were trying to look at this as a provider group, it became too much to get done, and Mike had some follow-up questions, and he was going to meet with you and go over them. And so that's where we ended it. And I'm curious, because I see new information in here, and so I don't know if you and Mike had reviewed it or what happened.
I've never been contacted by
Yeah,
Mike.
he hasn't contacted us at all.
Cheryl, my question is, on number 6, where it talks about GCACH holds 15% for organizations in extra need. Is that 15% still 15%, or did that change?
It kind of changed.
So, because it looked like on some of those other slides it was different.
Oh, is it 12% now?
Well, there was one that was 12, there was one that was 14.
I think they changed it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the only thing. Because when we went to the provider meeting and we presented this at the provider meeting on the 8th, everybody concurred that was
But
there.
Carol came to a different meeting after that. She sat in on our provider meeting.
No, that was a different, that was the.
You missed the last provider
before
meeting.
that.
Excuse me?
The provider readiness meeting that we have, that you weren't at that
Oh,
one.
that's not what, I'm talking about the provider meeting that you sat in on.
Correct.
That we did our discussion.
Yes, and we have changed the contract based on Becky Cole's analysis that we sent out.
We made those changes that you wanted that first meeting, and then we had our provider readiness meeting on the 8th, and I don't believe you were there.
But I was asking about the meeting with Mike that he was hoping that the 2 of you could.
I've
get
never been
together.
contacted by Mike.
Okay, I'm just asking if you and Mike had reviewed this, because I know,
But
different group.
we reviewed this when he was on the phone at the provider readiness meeting, and I asked him directly, do you concur with these changes in this contract? And he said, yes, he did.
Perfect. Yep, that's what I'm asking. All right, make sure that.
So this is Ed. So one of the things I think that we, as a board, you can approve the template, there will be an individual negotiation with each provider, and so some of these things may be resolved individually. I'm not sure it's okay for us to collectively bargain a contract. So I think as far as approving the template and approving the initial form, I think we're okay, but I don't know that this goes forward as a take it or leave it offer. Can it do that?
Senator, do you have a comment?
Didn't we already approve the funding allocation, so we've already voted to just take it or leave it? So I don't know that there's a lot of room for negotiation.
The offer is consideration in a binding contract. You didn't approve the final terms and conditions of the binding agreement.
And Carol, you would have our attorney look this over, or has already done that?
Yes.
Rhonda?
Yes.
This is Lori, and I need to go. I'm just concerned that I'm not sure if you have a quorum if I go.
I think we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Any other questions or comments about the contract?
So are we clear if the 15%, is that the correct?
Not. It's not if you base it upon the other schedules that were just up on the board.
Okay.
If we keep ARP in it, it's 12%. And then 2% for the GCACH admin.
Diane, can you speak up, please?
And then 2% for the GCACH admin fee. I think that's included in it. So maybe that's what, no, 12% should be the reserve.
Are you talking about page 4, number B, Diane?
It's actually on page 3, and it's number 6.
Okay, but it's also on page 4.
Is it on page 4? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm talking about page 4. I'm page 6. Page 3.
Yes, it is also on page 4. You're right. Under number 8.
Yeah, we probably need to just change those two to make sure that they're the right percentage.
So I would move to approve the contract with the identified changes and allow staff to negotiate contracts individually.
I second. Okay, thank you. We've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wake up.
Aye. Okay, I'm expecting to hear a lot of no's or abstentions, I think. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Aye.
Darlene and Sandra?
MCO said.
Probably ought to be.
Okay, so if you support the motion, would you raise your hand, please? Just 1, 2, 3. Okay, you guys just weren't loud enough, so motion carries. Thank you very much. We're getting to the end, I think.
Sorry, for clarification, that was Darlene, Sandra, and Ed who were the.
We didn't hear anything.
We didn't hear anything.
So I don't know if he's on the line.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the IMC BH provider tracker or the status? Did we do the status?
Well, Diane, do you want to go into the tracker real quick?
Apparently you're going to hear a lot from me today. I'm so sorry. But anyways, this is kind of where we're at. So we talked about the milestones that they need to do.
So we're talking about this one?
Yes. So these are the steps that we've been working with each provider. And so right now, as of right now, we almost have everybody's transition plans started, and we're needing to go over them with them. So we're almost, like I said, we're almost at that point to get the contract signed on most of these. We just have a few more to go.
Wow.
We've been very busy.
Thank you. It's informative.
Very nice.
Nice.
Make sure. I know this is what goes on.
Yes. Okay, I think we're down to the semi-annual report.
Woohoo! Yay! So Wes has a really great presentation that he and I worked on, which is a distillation of many iterations of understanding what was in the CSA. But I just want to say, I wanted to thank all of the staff for all of their contributions. We worked very, very hard without the benefit of a consultant this time around. Everybody contributed. Every single member of our staff contributed to the quality of this report. I think it's a really good report. All of the board of directors who have prepared this report in a hard binder for you. And not only is it a great report, but some of the information that's in the back I think will be really useful to you as you're going through. There's a chart that shows all of the social determinants of health in each county that we base the county health fund on. There's a chart that shows the individual scores of all the organizations that are going to be receiving contracts for the purpose of practice transformation. There's a report that has the summary of the CSA analysis with all of the histograms and the charts and graphs that Wes prepared. So there was a lot of labor by staff members. There's even a list of who received LOIs and CSAs from. Thank you to Lauren for that. But just a lot of information in this that was, that was gleaned over many hours of work from our staff. And so I just wanted to say thank you to the staff for all of the time and energy that they put into the semi-annual report. Thank you, staff. And so with that, we're going to let Wes talk us through the highlights of the semi-annual report.
I'm going to stand, and as I go through this, I ask that if you would please, Carol and Sam, if you want to interject in any part of this, that would be great. So let me go through and go to the next slide. So as you know, current state assessment was recently done. The assessment serves several purposes. As we've talked about at a previous board meeting, it was to assess provider willingness and readiness to collaborate with the Greater Columbia, which we did our initial provider selection. There was a high-level need written in the SAR to conduct a current state assessment, the goals of which were to identify gaps, barriers, and assets in existing services. And the sentence that we really wanted to answer was, how would our partnering providers want us to implement programs to support their projects? So the CSA helped us identify how to really do our work. Go to the next slide. Briefly, it was sent out in May. It came back. It went to 78 organizations that originally sent letters of interest. The letters of interest query went out to a much broader list of several hundred organizations. 78 organizations responded to the LOI. 57 organizations responded to the CSA. The response rate to the CSA was about 73%. There was a stipend paid to it. So the response rate was actually pretty robust. So we took the CSA, we analyzed it. Carol and Sam and myself sat down. Sam brought in a lot of really valuable market information that we're seeing out in the delivery system. That led to the development of the report that actually went into the semi-annual report, or SAR. It also produced a report that's in your packet. If it's not in your packet, it was part of the email that went out that Lauren sent out. It may not be in the paper packet. There's a bunch of tables in there that Carol talked about, and there's some verbiage that goes along with the exception in the back. That was further distilled down into a PowerPoint presentation that went to the Practice Transformation Work Group. At that time, the information was assessed. We had actually a really good discussion. Through all that, the GCACH staff got together and sort of put together 4 high-level conclusions about our work. 3 of them are based on needs, and 1 of them is tied to a confirmation of our work overall. Next slide. So the big conclusion, the first big conclusion was clinical care management for high needs, high risk populations is essential to our work. The goal here is to prevent vulnerable patients from falling through the cracks. As we discussed last year in a presentation that was made to the Leadership Council, this population of individuals constitutes about 5 to 10% of the overall population, but they have a disproportionate level of effect on utilization and cost. The top 5% probably uses about half of all utilization and costs. and the top 10% would utilize about 70% of all costs. And looking at the top 5% for the greater Columbia overall population, we estimate that's about 10 to 15,000 individuals. These are individuals that come from a broad spectrum of demographics and clinical characteristics, as well as socioeconomic conditions. So it includes people who have substance use disorders and maybe homeless, have disabilities, severe persistent mental illness. They really have high-level needs. So what's needed here, and we talked a little bit about this at the Leadership Council, differentiating between nurse case management and community health workers coming in. And community health workers play a really important role in coordinating care. What I'm talking more about here is intense clinical case management for those people who really need a lot of attention and hand-holding, and have someone walk them through sort of warm transitions from one setting to another. So these would be primarily nurses that do assessments, planning, coordination, implementation, and evaluating patient care. The options that are laid before us from what we've been able to gather through the CSA might include referrals to care coordination organizations such as Consistent Care, Aging and Long-Term Care, and Signal Health, who already do this. It could also potentially be a clinic-based nurse case manager, such as an RN within the provider practices, and some organizations might already be doing this. There may be some other options for individuals with, I would call lower care needs, and that might include mobile services, community paramedicine, palliative care. And all those individuals have responded back with a willingness to partner with us. Supporting this work, there would be Health IT to coordinate this, to help with patient transfers. This would include things like direct secure messaging, pre-manage, and other things. These are some software ideas that we've talked about and that we're planning on putting into place. A big question that needs to be answered is, what is the sustainable funding model for this? Does it come through the provider organization paying for that service within their organization? Does it revolve with the provider organization contracting out with one of the agencies or organization types that we just talked about? Does the MCOs come in and help sustain this? We're not going to answer that today, but it's an important question that's put on the table. The GCACH Practice Transformation Navigator team, we've talked about the idea of including in the Practice Transformation Implementation Work Plan, which is our term for the change plan, including a stipulation that the provider practice put into place some specification of how they're going to manage these high-risk patients. That would include strategies for identifying those patients, which could include risk stratification software that's linked to their population health management system. Once they're identified, then we would ask to have how those patients would be managed specified as well. Pause. Slide 2. Formalized collaborations are needed to support practice transformation in the patient-centered medical home. So the goal here is to create formalized clinical community linkages to support comprehensive coordinated care. That would mean formalized relationships from one provider to another, and perhaps from a provider to a social service agency. So again, this would include healthcare and community-based organizations. These might be multi-organizational agreements, and they would include a delineated or outline of what that care pathway or use case is going to look like. So it's clear about the expectations of what happens to the patient and perhaps to the information that goes along with the patient. To formalize this, there would be a memorandum of understanding, a contract, or some other formal document to bring all this together. Health IT, again, could support this through direct secure messaging. In Ellensburg, they've shown great success with the Digital Health Commons project. And an example here, a very simple example, is in terms of hospitals communicating back to community providers to provide information around discharge summaries, care plans, and other information. That should be going on, but we see a great deal of variability in the actual delivery system. Pause. Third identified need is that the healthcare workforce capabilities, the skills, training, scope of practice must reflect the needs of the primary care medical, excuse me, I keep on saying that, patient-centered medical home, forgive me. So the goal of the patient-centered medical home is to have training for team-based care and workers practicing at the top of their license. And so this includes RNs, MAs, it would also include perhaps pharmacists, nutritionists, care coordinators, and more. All of those working together in a team-based care approach. And the roles of those individuals would probably change from the way that they're currently being directed. A long-term strategy is to create a career pathway, which would be tied to a training curriculum that would be linked to teaching institutions such as high schools, schools of nursing, community colleges, medical schools, training organizations, and more. For short term, we were thinking, and we've identified training opportunities directly tied to provider organizations. There's a statewide health systems and capacity building partnership that Carol's a part of, which includes the directors from the other accountable communities of health and healthcare authority, and they've come up with a list of statewide training needs, for example, training around cultural sensitivity, which is of course very important in our area. Some other training needs include around opioid management, medication-assisted treatment, as well as buprenorphine prescribing waiver training, the 6 building blocks guidelines, and prescription monitoring program. For transitional care, we identified low use of the Interact model, which is one of the evidence-based models pointed out in the project toolkit. There's also low use of the Boost tool, which is used at discharge for discharge planning. Both of those can help prevent readmissions. There's also, there was discussion about the teach-back method, chronic disease self-management for patients, intentional pregnancy planning. Previously, we had a presentation about upstream and the services that they can provide to FQHCs, and oral health assessments and fluoride varnishes for oral health.
Well, I was just going to say, Dan's not here, and so I feel like he's channeling me. But the other thing that comes out or maybe fits into here is training on interdisciplinary care, interdisciplinary team care. And he's obviously that's his thing, but it seems to me that should be included in here somewhere.
What would be an example of that?
Interdisciplinary team care, how different disciplines work together to serve the patient. So, physicians, behavioral health specialists, pharmacists, all the things you just talked about. But, schools are just now, in Yakima, we have a group, and it's a very long name. Interdisciplinary, interprofessional, disciplinary. There are groups that are meeting together to try to teach professionals how to work together to serve the patient. It is all about patient-centered medical home. But training opportunities, that would be a really good training opportunity about patient-centered medical home.
Yeah, they've done full simulations from emergency straight in through the full scope of care, even follow-up. So
includes dietitians, all the things you just talked about, but it's bringing all those disciplines together.
Addresses that as well. The CHW curriculum addresses that, for you to come onto a team and be part of an interdisciplinary team with what your role would be on that.
That sounds like it directly links into team-based care, which is
it is, yeah.
a fundamental piece of PCMH.
Yeah, so that's Keith, right? Monosky, that's heading that.
I don't know if it's Keith or Dan, or maybe it's the two of them
It could
together.
be both, yeah.
Great.
So the Interact and the Boost tool, that's what we would prefer them to use, but right now there's a low use of that. Is that what you're saying there?
Right now, there's a low use of that. We would like to make it available as a possible option if it more ties into some of the outcomes that we want to achieve. We know that through the RAP project, through the SIM model, that the use of the Boost tool had a direct effect on reducing rehospitalization and emergency department usage. It was actually a modified form of the Boost tool. I think there was a question added on there that asked, do you anticipate that this patient will potentially be readmitted to the hospital for the same condition? And I think the discharge nurse was the one that responded to that question. And there was a strong correlation between what that person said and what actually happened to the patient. So there's some opportunities with that. I also want to make sure that I mentioned that the Practice Transformation Navigator team is also doing a great job at educating provider practices how to change their reimbursement to be more in line with patient-centered medical home. Sam has a huge amount of knowledge about some of the details and intricacies of this, is passing that knowledge on to the navigators, and we think that that will help support the sustainability model so that when they make these changes and possibly additions to their practices, they can get reimbursed for it. Last slide. So this is the high-level confirmation of our work, and I wish the board had listened to the presentation that was done by Mike Hindmarsh. It was just fantastic, and it was so spot on, and Carol and I and others were nodding their heads looking at what Mike was recommending, and it is just so consistent with the work that we have in place right now. There's a few things that we learned today that we're going to pass on, such as around learning collaboratives, which Carol might talk about, but really we believe that we're in line with the work that originally came from McCall, led to the chronic care model, and is now in the patient-centered medical home. We seem to be very consistent with the theoretical outline of the model. So PCMH is the right strategy to be successful under the transformation project and to achieve the triple aim.
The quadruple aim.
Quadruple aim, thank you. We learned that today. That includes provider satisfaction.
It's getting ready to be this one added.
Oh, is there? What's the fifth one?
I don't know yet. I just know it's coming.
Well, it'd be great to actually know about that because that might shape our strategy. So our goal is for those participating providers that we interact with, we would like to achieve successful transformation in 95% of them. So we have our original list of 23 providers, and some of those organizations were picking 2 provider practices. So the goal is, and this is pretty lofty, to try to have successful implementation in 95% of those. So the justification that we've used for PCMH, there's tons of research around this, but a more comprehensive, coordinated approach to change management within the primary care practice is foundational to the success of the demonstration. So the primary care practice, so when I say primary care practice, it's not just FQHCs or primary care practice tied to a hospital. It can also be primary care that's in a behavioral health agency where they've assumed responsibility and empanelment of that patient. So where they're managing not only acute care, but also chronic care needs. PCMH can be linked to enhanced Medicaid reimbursement and is needed for success in the emergent value-based payment marketplace. PCMH ties together all 4 of our project areas into a portfolio. This was a challenge that we struggled with last year. HMA came on board. It sort of led us into the discussion around high-cost, high-needs patients, and then we went into population health management. PCMH is really the key to bringing those project areas together into a portfolio. As well, original research that we learned this morning and which we had known about earlier, we're on the chronic care model, which is now fully integrated into PCH, shows that doing those models will effectively transform and help us achieve success around the pay-for-performance measures that are linked in the demonstration project. The experience from the New York Delivery System Reform Incentive Program shows that practices that emphasize effective change management were 6 times more likely to achieve outcome measures, and their implementation of change management was through PCMH. And finally, PCMH practices are more attractive to primary care physicians during the recruitment process. So after this, there are several slides, which are, again, the distillation that was presented to the Practice Transformation Work Group. This is available to the board, as well as the other analysis, and the entire SAR itself is also available to you. So there's a lot of documentation, but we're trying to be very transparent about what we found from the assessment and what we're doing going forward.
Well, I will say I was home ill a few days last week and read all 87 pages. And it was riveting. Very well done. And so, again, congratulations to the staff for putting it all together. And I don't wish you my illness, but if you have any time on a beach coming up soon, you might take it with you and read through it. It was very well done.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I like the colorful map. It's awesome.
Like what?
That's
Okay, so let's talk about the practice transformation kickoff meeting. Sam and Carol?
Do you want to talk about it, Ms. Sam? Do you want to outline, then we'll tell more
Sure.
details?
Okay. So when we were trying to determine, how do we make this real to our providers, we thought, well, we'd seen North Central had done a wonderful kickoff for their practice transformation efforts. I think VHT's is coming up. I think Pierce is today. And so we want to have a celebration to celebrate the success that we have come to so far. And obviously, we've picked 23 provider organizations to work with in terms of practice transformation, but there's a lot of supporting roles that are necessary to make this successful. And so the more staff thought about it, the more we wanted to know, well, where is the board at in terms of, the next steps? We know that we've identified provider organizations, but there's supporting roles. There's the care management that needs to happen. There's the social determinants of health that we need to look at. So we don't feel like we've totally come to terms with the funding that needs to be allocated in order for us to be truly successful. So that's why we see some of those comments today about our care coordination agencies and the supporting roles that we need to figure out. How do we work with that? Is it contractual? Is it incentive funding? So we don't know. But how can you have a kickoff meeting without all of your partners, number one? Or did we want to make this more intimate with just the 23 provider organizations? So we thought we would get some of your feedback because we have some great ideas that we want the board's blessing to implement those.
So is there a budget tied to this?
Well, with the 145 that we've identified, it's around $7,000. So yes, there is a cost. It's about $37 a piece, and that would be at Tierra Blanca Winery, and basically Walter Clore was about the same amount. So it's kind of a wash between the two facilities, whereas Walter Clore would have to be catered. The Tierra Blanca would be a sit-down dinner.
And that would be how many seats at the table for that?
145, 150.
150.
Which would really make that more intimate for those entities. It doesn't really provide for us to bring everyone to the table. So that's why we're reaching out to get suggestions on what that would look like, because we don't want to get misinformation out there that this is the only entities that we were working with, because we really want to include our community partners.
Do we know what the agenda looks like yet?
Well, we had thought about a keynote speaker, and then Sam's suggestion was a panel of experts to really kind of inform everybody of what their journey through practice transformation has been like. It would include Chris DV, and Jocelyn Pedrosa, and Bridget Beachy.
Yes, Kevin Taylor,
and there was one other.
Brian Sandoval.
So the panel's going to talk about what it took to get to patient-centered medical home recognition.
Well, and their experiences. So Chris would moderate that.
And how that looks as transformation of care and meeting the goals of the entity. It's not necessarily the outline, the prescriptive manner of PCMH, but how do you achieve all the different project areas that you're applying for, and how does that fit into that model?
And besides, I only have the authority to contract up to $5,000.
That's why you're asking this.
So my thought with this is, do you want more people from those
23 organizations to come together so that you just don't have one or two from an organization? Or do you want a broad base to get everybody kind of excited, but you're only going to have a couple people from each organization? So I think it's do you want the breadth? Do you want the depth? And then what's the outcome that you want at the end of that?
Do we have any funders that can like?
I'm so glad you happened to ask that with a couple of
Thank you.
NCOs in the
I
room.
was just thinking that.
We're not twice a day and not just once a day. We work for everybody else to not get. Merry Christmas paying, United.
United States, there we go.
I guess, are we calling it, are we having a true kickoff, or are we having a celebration that we've gotten this for? Because to me, then kickoff would be a kickoff for those folks that you're taking to the next level. So that would be more intimate versus a celebration, which is that we got here with the great information of where we're going next. To me, they're different things.
Great.
I think we should just see it as a release party.
We thought about doing like a party at more of a celebration type later on in the year at a leadership council, right?
I think it's a rollout, pretty much, in the sense that everything has come together, and here we are. So I would think that it would be really a high celebration, and you've made it to your 16th birthday. What's 21 gonna look like?
Well, and I'm kind of with Sandra. Is if we want to bring to the table the partners that are not yet, or the groups that are not yet at PCMH, then that's very different. And that's really who we want to attract, right? Because we want to start rolling this out to the partners that aren't there yet.
Well, not only just the partners that are PCMH, but that are playing the supporting roles, like the paramedics, the local health jurisdictions, the palliative care people, our behavioral health organizations. So the list that you have in front of you are all the people that Sam and Lauren got together and they said, okay, who submitted a CSA, who's on our practice transformation work group, who's on the board, who are our important state partners. And so this was a cumulative list of the people that we've identified that have been really in it from the very beginning. And so on the right-hand side, I've listed, what organization they represent and how they have been involved.
That's a tricky question.
Yes, you
Who's
may.
not in this list that you think could feel excluded?
So when I look at this list, there's some work group committee chairs that I don't see listed on here who've been instrumental in leading the calls and things that got us to here.
So would these be? Are we focusing on the people or the organizations?
I don't know.
Who
What do you have in mind? Sandra?
Yeah, but who are you missing? Who are we missing?
Well, I don't see Bertha from Virginia Mason Memorial.
Yeah, she's on here.
Is she?
Yeah.
It's just memorial position.
She's on memorial position.
Oh, okay. Right. So I was just under a different letter. So it was like Angelina from our organization.
And
Is she a committee chair?
She's co-chaired with Rhonda on the bidirectional.
I thought that was Brian.
No, it's Angelina.
She's one of our.
They kind of took turns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She's attended every
She's on there.
council meeting.
Behavioral.
And Brian
This
is
is the
there.
organization that was.
Well, and I guess
they would bring.
I guess that's my question is, maybe we probably shouldn't be specific about people, and the organization should be responsible for deciding
Right.
the people. We should be deciding the organization. So maybe focus more on the organization. To Jorge's question, are there organizations that are excluded from this?
The other way to ask the same question is, if we had 20 more slots, who else would be invited?
Well, so these are all the ones that submitted CSAs, right?
Okay.
But there were some that submitted LOIs, for example, Benton County Fire District 1 and Benton County Fire District 2, and so that there were a few that submitted LOIs that didn't submit CSAs.
And there might be some on that behavioral health list that aren't on here.
They're all
We didn't
include those. They're all
We did?
included.
Except for the one we just,
Yeah.
I mean,
Barth is,
yeah.
yes, because we had a question on that.
I understand. Okay.
So, some of the organizations that have participated in the leadership and maybe did not, should they be included in Yakima Valley Community Foundation or United Way of Benton Franklin? And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't.
Yeah,
but-
so again, I'll just take us back to the question, is this is going to be a kickoff on how to, on how you can participate in patient-centered medical home. And I'm going to pick on Carrie. Are you going to want to participate in that?
You mean in the celebration?
No, well, I'm not calling it a celebration. I'm calling it a kickoff of patient-centered medical home.
This event?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think board representation is important, yeah.
Well, United Way want to participate.
Yeah. They would.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Well,
Because
she's a committee member.
one of the things that I've experienced with United Way is that when there's something that's big moving in the community, they want their hands in it. They want to be involved, and this would be a big movement in the community.
So if that's the case, then does it make sense to have them involved? If we're calling this a kickoff and we've got 23 providers identified that we're kicking off with, and these are the ones that are going to be expected to carry on the work, does United Way still fit in that?
There's an opportunity for them to come on board in some way. They will.
Right, which I think is always the case, and that's the case for others that don't get a contract in this first year. But if this is a kickoff for year 1, does it make sense to include them?
Can we have 2 events?
Yeah,
I think we're really talking about 2 separate events.
I agree. I 100% agree. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where staff ended, you know, is like, well, maybe we need to have 2 events, the smaller one that's more intimate, that is the 23 organizations that are carrying the flag for patient-centered medical home, you know. But then we also recognize that there's been a lot of hard feelings in the community that there are people that are not getting funded. And we've heard that particularly from Southeast Washington. And so we're very concerned about, you know, the people that feel like that they've been left out of this, because that's not the case. That we want them to play. They have a very important supporting role to play. And when Wes talked about this morning, that, you know, we've laid a very solid foundation with PCMH as being our strategy and our model of care. And, you know, we've picked 23 organizations that can carry the flag initially for this demonstration. But then we also have the pillars that are supporting, you know, the roof. And those pillars are our community partners, our community-based organizations, our healthcare partners, our care coordination agencies. And then overall, at the top of that, the roof, I'm using your analogy for is that overall community campaign, that messaging that has to support everything it is that we're doing, you know, whether that's a campaign on diabetes or a campaign on ACEs or trauma-informed care. We see this as just really building a solid structure. So we don't know how to accomplish this, you know, initially without leaving some people behind, knowing that they will be coming on board, or do we, you know, have one big celebration that's less, you know, intimate, that includes more community partners?
But what if you have, what if you have one group that is whatever that celebration is, and then there's a contingency of that group that you keep that goes deeper into what is the actual transformation work that's starting now?
Yeah, that's good.
I was actually thinking of it in the opposite way.
Okay.
I was thinking you start off with this group that's working right now, and from that you develop the presentations and programs, how you're going to expand it to this larger group and have a bigger group. You know, so we're going to go work with you guys, see what's going on. How are we going to? This was great. This was great. This is great. These are the things we want to make sure we're telling the rest of the people, and how we're going to push that forward. I mean, it's you know, chicken and egg.
But it's still doing it.
I kind of think that I kind of see it as 2 different things. I mean, I could think back to one of your initial kickoffs when we were at Walter Clore, and we got everyone in that room and kind of brought up, to me, I see that as like the big celebration of look at what all we've contributed to, and we still need you, even if you're not contract. Like, we still want you at the table. We still have a lot of things that we have to talk about for years 2 and beyond that we need to start now, versus a kickoff, which is that just a kickoff is something different to me than a celebration. A celebration.
And I agree with Sandra. I think having it more inclusive so that, and really provide that kind of report out on what's been accomplished and what the goals are going forward, so community partners can identify that, oh, I can be a part of this. This will help support our community. So, you know, I see, you know, some of our elected, you know, representatives
and maybe
being
even
part of that as well.
Yeah, and maybe even having a partner showcase. Like, so we have these groups that are contracted. Like, why don't we let our partners showcase what they're doing? Because we want to have a better understanding of what we're doing. One of the things that's been beneficial about the Leadership Council is we've learned more and more of what each of us partners does and doesn't do. And so even if you had another kind of like a partner showcase, like, oh, you know what, I've been meaning to touch bases with you. Oh, and I need to touch bases with you, so we can keep that networking going and kind of do it in a more celebratory way than what we've been able to accomplish in the Leadership Council meetings, where we're really trying to learn a lot and make some decisions. We haven't really had a good opportunity to keep that large group networking time frame. You know, people are coming in late, running off early because they have another meeting, whereas this would be a dedicated time to do that. My thought.
So the kickoff would just be the 23.
Yes.
23 and me. Oh,
Providers, then plus the board members, and then the 17 behavioral health providers.
And we also,
they're kicking off their part of it as well.
and we also talked a little bit about inviting some officials from Healthcare Authority.
Right.
Sue Birch, the Executive Director, Marianne Littebad, the Director of Medicaid, Lori Zeichen, Mike Provence,
Mark Provence,
excuse me, Chase Napier, some of the individuals who've been really tied to this project area, and particularly Sue Birch. I think it would be highly instructive if we had a keynote, sort of like Mike this morning, who really lays things out. I mean, you were there, Rhonda, just in a really plain way about how we achieve this. I think this would be very educational for her.
We also thought about inviting LIN leaders. Obviously, there's some overlap, but some of them are not part of any committee or, you know.
Okay, well, we're at 3:00. Does that give you enough direction?
Yes.
Okay, so we still have a couple of things left on the agenda.
Do we need to make a?
So, October 24th and 25th symposium.
Do I need well, it might be less now that we've dwindled down the list, but do I have the authority to go ahead and contract for?
Do you
We
need a
need to give her
motion?
spending authority?
Yeah.
In the event that it goes over 5,000?
Yeah.
Okay, so could I have a motion to? I so moved. Okay. Motion. There's a second.
What's the motion?
Give that, give GCACH the authority to spend over 5,000 for the retreat.
Does that have a cap? Can we have like up to 10?
Up to 10, would that be sufficient? And then MCOs are all going to contribute.
So we're abstaining.
Okay, Madeline has a motion. Is there a second? Second by Ronnie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next two items are very quick. Just an announcement that the Healthcare Authority is having a convening on October 24th and 25th. That the subject is health equity, and we can send up to 20 members of our organization. So if you have any interest, especially on the first day, October 24th, then please let me know. It should be a very instructive meeting. And then the final item here is, as you know, we were working with the Yakima Nation to do a dental health aid therapy program. It got as far as CMS, and CMS came back and said, we don't authorize the DHAP program because as an organization, you have to be able to provide service to all your Medicaid clients, and the Yakimas were only going to be providing the service to their tribal members, and so the Northwest Portland Indian Health Board is filing a brief to try to get the DHAT allowed on tribal reservations, and they asked us if we wanted to be a friend of the brief and the amicus brief, and that hearing would be in December. So I wanted to ask the board if we had any interest in, filing as a friend of the court, or if we want to stay out of it. I didn't have the authority to say yes or no.
Would we need more details?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know whether or not I should say we want more details or we're not interested at all, because I don't want to waste anybody's time if we're truly not interested in being a friend.
I think that it's important to make those connections with them and to be a supportive entity. Being a friend of the court doesn't mean that we have to stand up there and testify to anything. Find out more details and come back with that and say, we can stand there as your friend, because that gives them strength. And that supportive piece, if we're really going to do something with the Yakimas, that supportive strength is really an important piece to them, as well as for us working with them. I think that we would be benefited if we did.
But Carol, I think, if I remember correctly, the email, I think CMS wanted an answer by tomorrow, correct?
In terms of our,
In terms of who's
of our presence. I mean, we could always say we're going to be there and then say, no, we're not going to be there. But that's a detail. I think it's whether or not we want to be a friend of the court or
It would be helpful if we had some more information.
Okay. Well, then I will.
That's a
You want
fairly
to know more
important.
specifically what we're endorsing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What are other examples of the same?
Yeah,
And then I do apologize, I actually have one thing that is not on the agenda that I alluded to earlier. So this is an opportunity to be in a joint contract with Olympic Community of Health to do more digital commons projects. So
Digital health comments, yeah.
So I don't know, Julie, if you've had an opportunity to hear about the digital commons project in Kittitat?
That's my Monday afternoon.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know what value you guys have gotten out of that. We think that Rob Arnold is absolutely amazing in helping us set
I
these
am
networks.
very, very enthusiastic about it with the A team and the hospital and all the providers associated with it. And this is something that, trying to get a common data set that they can use for, in our case, what our A team members has been a project for a number of years. This is the first time they feel like they're really getting traction. So Monday, I think we're supposed to be looking at sort of what the shared work is, what the common elements are, what's really being developed. So there's a lot of enthusiasm.
So by going in together as a group, again, part of the ongoing expense of this is that there has to be a cloud-based server where this information is stored. The pilot project is being compensated by the Greater Columbia, but over the long term, they'll have to continue to make this cost. But the overall level is fixed, so the more individuals or organizations that go in, the smaller per share per organization. So by combining forces, it benefits the organizations who are currently participating and who we anticipate will be participating going forward, because we expect this to go out to at least a few more organizations or a couple more organizations in the ACH.
Could you tell us we were going to have a demo on this next month?
Originally when we scheduled the transitional care leadership council, which was next month, we had talked about bringing Rob on, but we'd also talking about consistent care and the RAP project, which the leadership council still hasn't heard about. So,
But Rob could come to a board meeting.
well,
right?
this is true. Yeah, we could bring him to a board meeting. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Did I dream that? Did you tell us you were going to bring him to the September meeting?
We had talked about it for the leadership council, but
Yeah.
we could bring him just to a board meeting.
Yeah.
Would the board like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want him to physically come, or could he present remotely?
Remotely is fine.
Okay.
Whatever is convenient for him.
Okay. Anything else?
So the contract would be coming, it would be a $50,000 contract to start working with all of our network organizations that might be interested in a similar project to digital commons. So but more to come on that.
So that's accounts receivable, or
That-
is it accounts payable?
Actually, it would come out of our population health management fund that we've already set aside $2.7 million in. So it would be a $50,000 contract coming out of that, so.
So the partnership,
The partnership is
Power
Olympic
Day.
Community of Health, Puget Sound, Fire, and Greater Columbia HCH. But Puget Sound Fire has already paid into it. They're paying $150,000 into the work, and then Greater Columbia and OCH would share $50,000 apiece. So it would be work that Rob would perform in all three of these different areas. More to come.
Any other business?
I have a quick comment. We are going to be creating a one-pager from marketing materials, and there's still some photos I need of board members. Let me pull it up. So if you're
Carrie.
Carrie, I need one.
Very useful, Rhonda.
Ed,
Now
Julie,
we'll have
I'll need
Julie.
one for you. And I don't know why Mandy's on there. I'll take that off. But I just need those 4 as soon as possible.
You want to say, Julie? Oh, look who's scared now.
my shirt works really good.
It's a lot of moose.
My shirt looks really good in the background, so.
Okay, any other business? If not, it's a great meeting, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Brian.
Thank you.
Look at Brian. Looks like a baby.
Well,
You take that one good picture and you keep it